Okay. Okay. Okay, so I'm waiting to be let in.
I just, you're in, so let's hang up.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning, Pam. I can hear you, but I can't see you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Fine, loud and clear. You're coming across loud and clear.
Can you see me?
No, I can't. So you need to go to the bottom of your screen to the left-hand corner, and there's the icon for the camera. Click on that so you can open up the icon.
Yeah, I'm on my phone. 1 second, just give me. Why does it say privacy? Give me a little minute. I'm on the phone and it's not behaving.
Look to the bottom left-hand corner.
Yeah, those. Let me try changing the signal, the direction. Give me a minute.
Let me, before I start, good morning to a very beautiful Pamela Clark, the Queen of Dominica in England. How are you?
Good morning, Gabe. Good morning, and thank you very much for hosting this Zoom. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
But I want to thank you because you've come up with a splendid idea, which is really essential to, I think, nation building. That's heritage preservation. And that is the Dominica Diaspora Museum. So we'll be talking about that and its originator, the person who came up with the germ of the idea. The genesis resided within your very creative mind. So let me start with you, though, Pam. Today's date being the 29th of November, 2023. And Pam, at this time, you're in Dominica, correct?
I am. I'm here for another 2 days. I've been here for a couple of months, all through the Creole season. And we'll
Outstanding.
be leaving tomorrow, as a matter of fact.
Outstanding. So you're part of Dominica's diaspora, and I'm speaking to you from Upper Marlboro, Maryland. And so I want to go ahead and try to record for posterity that which you, who it is you are, that which you've done, and that which you plan to do. So, Pam, where were you born and when were you born?
I was born in 1958 in Dominica, the Princess Margaret Hospital, right here. In fact, I'm minutes away from the place where I was born.
Outstanding.
So right now.
Outstanding. And who are your parents? Give us the name of your mother and father.
My father was Patrick Stafford David. He's originated from Portsmouth. His father was Uriah David, known as Wyas, because he was one of the original men wiring up Dominica, you know, for the telephone network. So that family's from Portsmouth, and my mum's family, originally from Wesley, the Princes from Wesley. It's a big family, big network, and I've discovered more of them recently.
So you're saying your father was called Wires, as in Wires?
No, my father was Patrick Stafford David, and his father was Uriah David.
Okay.
But he was known as Wyas because of the job he did. Wiring up the network.
Okay, so Wires really is a derivative of the word wire, W-I-R-E.
I think so. It's a nickname. You know, Dominicans, they always have a nickname.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And your mother, give us your mother's name and her
my mother is Gertrude David, and she was born Gertrude Prince, and her father was from Wesley, and his father actually he served in the World War One, and was Raleigh Prince. So she's a prince from Wesley, one of the princes from Wesley.
Amazing. You know, it's interesting for the historical record that many more Dominicans saw active duty in World War One than World War Two. In World War Two, most of the Dominicans who saw active duty served in the Royal Air Force. And those who
Okay.
were in the British Army, like my father, they more or less did garrison duty in Egypt, Italy, and then in the Caribbean. But in World War One, I think it exceeded 100 people. World War Two, just about 50 in the army and maybe about another dozen in the Air Force from Dominica. But in World
Right.
War One, many more served and many more died. Many died in
Mm-hmm.
Palestine, where they were with Allenby. And I want to share an interesting story that has to do with the diaspora. When Baroness Cutland of Ashton became Attorney General of the United Kingdom, I heard the news, I read it in the paper or online or whatever, and I sent her a copy of the book done by myself and Irving Andre for King and Country,
Mm-hmm.
the service and sacrifice of the British.
Yeah.
In fact, the first book was The Dominican Soldier. And I sent it off to her with a nice note congratulating her, and I thought nothing of it. And next thing you know, within about 2 weeks, I got a letter back embossed with the seal of on Her Majesty's service, thanking me for the gift and so on,
Yes.
saying that Irving was her cousin, but that she found her father's name in the book. No, her grandfather's name in the book. Her grandfather had served in World War One.
Mm-hmm.
And that, had we not, and we had the names, but we didn't know who belonged to whom. We just made the record, which comes to the issue of the museum and the importance of
Yep.
heritage and record keeping. So you were born in 1958, and
Yes.
you live in Dominica for how long before you migrate?
Um, well, I lived here in Rosehome in Goodwill for 7 years. And I spent a year in Portsmouth because my father went to England to study, to meet
Mhm.
his uncle who was studying there. Um,
What was his uncle studying, if you remember?
he was studying law. His name
I
was
see.
Christian David from
Okay.
Portsmouth.
Okay.
So my dad wanted to go to Canada, but my uncle said, well, you might as well come to England, because I'm here. You don't know anybody in Canada. My dad still applied to go to Canada. And I think he'd been in England for a couple of months when the Canadian government wrote to my mother, who was still here. And the letter said, yes, we want you and we'll pay for your whole family to come because, my dad was a skilled man. So the Canadian government wanted him, but my uncle said, well, you're already here in England, so stay. And in those days, you just obeyed your elders. So
Yes.
my dad stayed. Otherwise, we would have gone to Canada.
Interesting.
Life would
So
have been completely different.
what was your father's education background?
He was he was an electrical and mechanical engineer. So he went to Puerto Rico. He trained in Puerto Rico, and then he trained in the UK. So he was a technical man. He
Yes,
was
indeed.
my dad could fix anything, anything. And I mean, he even went to Saudi. He worked in Saudi for 13 years, and they had
Amazing.
machinery there that had not moved for, over a decade. And my dad arrived, and within a day, he'd actually made the parts that were missing and got the
Hmm.
machine going. So
So he was
that's
a
why he
machinist
picked
as
the
well.
thing.
Yeah.
He could actually fix anything.
Had he attended the grammar school or no? Do you know? Or yes.
He attended Rosa Boys.
Yes.
He attended Rosa Boys, and in growing up, we had lots of stories about Mother Bodger and
Yes, yes, yes.
his run-ins with Mother Bodger. He used to entertain us with these run-ins with
Yeah, for
Mother
those
Bodger.
who will listen to this, Mother Bodger, or as I knew her, Sister Bodger was a Belgian nun who ran the St. Martin's Girls' School of the Catholic Church,
That's
which was one of the most prominent schools in Roseau at the time. And she's a very renowned nun. In fact, the nickname for her when we were children was Sister Borgia Bread and Bulja. Bulja was a sandwich made of codfish spiced with onions and garlic that she
mm-hmm.
would sell to raise funds, or she would feed the children at the school. And she would walk around in the hot sun and fool cape and habit, of a nun, what nuns wear. So that's a fascinating piece of story. And your mother, what did your mother do, and what was her education?
My mother was actually raised in Antigua because her father had gone there from Wesley. He was a carpenter, so he migrated to Antigua and sent for her and her mother. I'm not sure what her mother did. She raised kids, she had children, she was a housewife. The father was a carpenter. So my mother went to school in Antigua. Her mother unfortunately died at the age of 8. So life didn't go that well for her for a few years, So she left school at 12. Yeah. She didn't go to secondary school. And her brother, Hugh Bellot, sent for her. So she returned to Dominica from the age of 12.
Okay. So how many of you, Pam, in your immediate family? You told us about your mother and your father. What about your brothers and sisters?
There were 6 of us. I've lost one sister. She came here on holiday and unfortunately died. She died at the same hospital where she was born. But there are 5 of us, 5 siblings.
What was her name, the sister who passed?
Janice Robinson. Yeah.
Janice Robinson.
Yeah.
Yes. And what did she study in England?
She didn't go to school in England. She was already 15 when she was sent for. She was the first of the siblings to join our parents. And between the 3 of them, they worked and sent for us. So all 5 of us went on a ship in the ship's nursery. So the fortunate thing about that is we were only separated for a year, unlike some other people who were separated for several years. We only had a year's separation from our parents. So you could say my sister, I'm not going to say her education was sacrificed, but she helped work to send for us. So she was a seamstress, and that's what she did for a living. She was a machinist. She could make you a coat looking like, a top-notch coat. She was very good at what she did.
Okay, so that she had Janice, and who were the other siblings?
Okay, so after Janice, there was me. There's 7 years difference between us. And then I've got a brother, Jerry, sister, Brenda, another brother, Tony, and the last brother, Philip. We're all Davids.
So it's Janice,
Pamela, Brenda. No, Jerry next.
Yeah. Brenda, Tony, and Philip.
Tony and Philip, yep.
Outstanding. So tell me, what did Jerry do?
Jerry worked for BT. He was a telephone engineer.
Okay. That's British Telecom.
Which is similar to Wyatt, similar to his grandfather, yes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And what about Brenda?
She's a science teacher. She teaches, she's retired now. So she taught chemistry.
Outstanding. I guess you went to university as well?
Yes, yeah.
Where did she attend university?
Don't ask me which one, because I was already, at the time she went to uni, I was living in Trinidad and I didn't pay attention to where she, yeah.
But she studied chemistry, I take it?
She studied food science to begin with, because she was interested in diet, being a dietitian at first, and then she converted to teaching. She did an education qualification after her first degree.
Okay. What about Brenda?
Oh, sorry, that was Brenda.
That was Brenda. What about Tony? Yeah, I'm sorry, Tony.
Tony is a businessman. He owned several letting agencies, and he was into property.
Okay, so he was a property owner.
He was a property tycoon, yes. Tony.
Very nice. And what about Philip?
Philip he also worked for BT until he retired.
And when you say BT, you mean British Telecom?
British Telecom, yes. He was a telecom man as well.
Outstanding.
But he's been living in Dominica for over a decade now. He's returned.
So he's one of the that wave of the Windrush generation returnees.
Yes, there's quite a big wave waiting to return, you know.
Yes, indeed. We'll talk about that in a moment because that's very important. Because back in 2001, in honor of the late Prime Minister Roosevelt Douglas, who was the first Dominican Prime Minister to have lived overseas for quite a period of time. In a way, you can say he was our first diaspora Prime Minister. He left for Canada when he was 20 and returned about a decade and a half later after attending university. So he was very big on Dominicans returning home and being part of the Dominican nation. So we'll talk about that legacy. So you went to school in Dominica before you left. Do you remember any of that?
I remember writing the date 1963. I remember using a slate. I remember the blue and white uniform of St. Martin's. Yes, but I don't think
white
I
shirt,
went
white shirt
long.
instead of a blue jumper.
White shirt and the blue tunic. Yes. The year I remember more is the year that our parents let us stay with grandparents in Portsmouth, and then I attended what was then the Portsmouth Government School.
Yes, yes.
Because my grandparents' land is exactly right next to the government school. It's
now I want to ask you this.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Next to it. Yes, go on.
I want to ask you this question, and the reason I ask about your Dominica education and your time in Dominica and what you remember is because that must have been very impactful, very influential in your life because you left at a tender age, relatively speaking. Yet you seem to have reserved or preserved rather within your very spirit a great love for Dominica. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because of my parents. They are Dominican, they're still Dominican. Our house was a very Dominican household. If you visit any Dominican of their generation, if you visit their house, it would be full of plants and images of nature. They belong to a Dominican association. So they belong to Duca and Dona, the Dominica UK Association, Dominica Overseas National Association. So
just for those who will be listening to this interview, Duca, Dominica UK Association, Duca, DUKA, and Donna, Dominica Overseas National Association, Donna, are two of the most prominent organizations of Dominican diasporans living in the United Kingdom. Is that correct?
Yes, they're London-based. So
and there are others. There are others in other cities.
There are many. Bristol, Preston. Yep. There are lots of them. And I've found quite a few more on Facebook that I didn't even know about. But these were the London-based ones. And in London, lots of Dominicans settled in Forest Gate. In fact, Forest Gate was famed for having the most Dominicans in the whole of the UK. Another set settled in Westbourne Park around Paddington side, where we have the carnivals, the annual carnivals. So we had an East-based organization and a West-based organization, and they would have events throughout the years. And Dominica.
And when if you can hold on for a second, when you say East-based and West-based, you mean East London and West London?
East London and West London, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So as children,
before you go into England too deeply, before you go into the United Kingdom too deeply, I want to go back to Dominica a little bit because I want to get to the point where you are getting ready to leave Dominica, and I want to know on what ship you sailed.
We sailed on the Ascantia.
Do you know how that's spelled?
ASCAN. Hang on a minute. ASCAN. CIA, I think, Ascantia. ASCANCIA. So we sailed to Southampton.
And that was in 1966?
1966, and we docked on the 11th of November, 1966.
So you just celebrated an anniversary?
We have. I won't say what happened on that anniversary in
So that's
Roseover.
57 years ago.
57 years. 57 years ago, I was here, back in my, yes, place of
So
birth.
let me ask you a question, Pam. When the time came for you to live, if you remember anything at all about the days leading up to your trip and how you felt, if you know how you felt about leaving Dominica, if you had any sense of England, what was before you go and telling us about how you felt about living Dominica,
Yeah.
what was your image of England? What was your sense of England? And before you answer, I want to let people who listen to this know that you and I are not very far removed in way of age. And so in those days, exercise books that we went to school with every day had a portrait of the King and Queen of England, or the King, the Queen of England, and the Duke of Edinburgh in full royal regalia on the cover.
Oh, it just reminded me. You just
And
reminded me.
so the presence of the royalty and Britain, the Royal Navy ships would visit and so on. So how did you feel about England? What did you know about England? And then tell us about how you felt about leaving Dominica.
To be honest, I had very little concept of, as a 7, 8-year-old, very little concept of England. It was a place I heard about. It was a place lots of people were talking about. Lots of my cousins had parents who went abroad. People were disappearing. When I say disappearing, children were going, and there was lots of expectations about leaving and joining parents. In 66, the Queen did visit Dominica and visited Portsmouth, where I was staying. So there was a lot of excitement because the Queen was coming. And at the Portsmouth Government School, we learned dances, we learned songs in preparation. And I was so disappointed. I was so disappointed when I saw the Queen on the.
Tell us about that, because that's very important, because I know exactly where you're going. Tell us why you're disappointed.
Well, in my imagination, I expected the crown, I expected the gown, all what we'd seen on the exercise book, in our picture books. Every child's got an image of a queen. And I saw this lady in a pink coat and a pink hat.
Stop right there. Do you know that I've written about the Queen's visit? I was no more than about 5 years old. And I can tell you what you just said resonates so much. There was a great, almost groan when people saw the Queen coming through Pottersville because she was in a plain Jane pink dress. And people, the image we had was, as you said rightly, from the exercise books, which we saw every single day. So I guess we as Dominicans just assumed that's how she dressed every single day. And we expected the crown and the gown and the scepter and the regalia. And people were a little deflated, to be frank with you. I remember that very pointedly, to the point that I wrote about it. Though I was very young, it was such a feeling that I remembered it, because people would talk about it, or people talked about it for many years afterwards, how they all came out looking to see this Queen, and then she was just a plain Jane dress woman.
The Queen, that's her, in a pink hat and a pink dress. Now, that was a big disappointment, but we got over that. I enjoyed school in Portsmouth. I mean, that's the year of school that I do remember from my education in Dominica. I remember being taught grammar at the age of 7, 8. And Teacher Neil and Teacher Ozzy were 2 teachers I remember from those days. There are people who will remember those names, because I've heard people recently talking about Teacher Neil and Teacher Ozzy. Very kind. I remember them as very kind young teachers. And in retrospect, they were probably only teenagers. Because when you're 7 or 8, a 19-year-old will seem like a big grown man. So I don't know how old they were, but I think they were very young. But they were very kind, because they knew, we were away from home. We were new to the school. Our parents had gone away. I just remember them being very kind teachers.
Outstanding. Yes. But I want to reflect before you get to the ship. as canvassing about this whole thing of people disappearing. It really
Yes.
was that way because I'll tell you, we had a friend called Kelvin, and his
Mhm.
parents had gone ahead and they sent for him. And I remember the day and Boyd's Avenue in Roseville, Kevin was being dressed. We all the boys in the neighborhood, the little children, all gathered at the house. It was like a sort of time of mourning, and he was
Mm.
being dressed, and he had a white. We'd never seen him dressed like that before. He had new shoes, new black shoes, new black socks. I mean, in those days, we ran around to the Roseville River bare feet, and a white shirt, a black bow tie, and his
Wow.
grandmother's. He was still with his grandmother, fussing with him, and he had a grip, what we call a grip. That's the what we call a
I
suitcase in
know.
those days,
Yes.
with his name written in crayon, Kelvin John, something like
Mm.
that. And he was crying
Oh.
because he was going to England and we would never see him again. So there was this thing about he would, in those days, people would say, you're going away.
Yes. Yes.
And that's very, very far away. And indeed, I never saw Kelvin again. I don't know whatever became of him. So a lot of children whose parents had gone ahead were
Mm.
sending for them. You would say,
Yeah.
so you come to school one day
Yeah.
and you say, where's Pam? Oh, didn't you hear?
Mm.
She's gone away. Her mother has sent for her, or her father has sent
Yeah.
for her. So
Yes.
it did something to the society. There was a lot of what you call dislocation in relationships. And people talk about Windrush as in the impact in England, but
Mm.
there was also a societal impact in Dominica. In that, for instance, as I said to you earlier, I never knew any of my mother's brothers, her
Right.
immediate brothers. I knew some half brothers, but all her
Mhm.
brothers had gone to Nottingham. Um, Two were miners, Johnson and
Yes.
Ambrose, and one was a carpenter, a construction worker, Washington. So with you, did you feel that dislocation where people
One.
was, you said, this, you used the word disappearing.
Okay. So my parents had disappeared. First, my father disappeared. Then my mother disappeared. Then my big sister disappeared. But the overwhelming feeling that I remember is one of yearning. That's the word I would use. Yes. Looking up at the sky, I would see aeroplanes passing and I would wave. I don't know. I think 8-year-olds are probably a lot wiser these days and more savvy, but somehow in my mind there, I somehow thought they were probably going round and round in the sky on their way to England because I'd be waving, and saying hello to my parents. There was a deep sense of loss and yearning. Just, I don't know, a child. I didn't have the words to express it, but it was a
Pam,
deep.
that is so, what you're saying is so moving. I remember those incidents very well at school. We'd be in the schoolyard in Roseau, the Roseau Mixed Infant School, and we'd see the trail of the plane all the way up. I would say, plane, hello, send something for me, or send so-and-so for me. And we'd wave at the plane. I mean, children today, I guess, as you say, are more savvy. They have more technology. We didn't have that sense, but we knew that that plane was maybe going to England or someplace
Mm,
far away where our relatives were, and
that's
we
right.
had the consciousness that those relatives also sent things for us.
Oh
Because at
yes, I
Christmas
did.
time, you would get the
Yeah.
packages and the money orders. Tell us
Well,
about
we
that.
got them every month. Our postal orders and the packages came. They were smaller. They weren't barrels. They were packages. They came monthly, and they would have things like underclothes, sweets, um, panties, vests, and I remember these packages coming, and it seemed as if the whole of the neighborhood would appear. And my aunt who looked after us at the time, my great aunt who looked after us at the time, would distribute half of the package. I never understood that.
Well, Dominica was a much more, I can be blunt and say, a much more closely knit society. It was the principle of Kudme, which is cooperative effort, and sharing and community spirit was very great, because
Mm.
I remember we could tell who had family in England because you
Mm-hmm.
could see the clothing was different from the clothing
Yes.
sold in stores in Roseau. And you're very right. People would share out of their packages to
Mm-hmm.
members of the community. And I remember the British toffee. Toffee was a very popular
Yes.
sweet that would be said, when you bit on it, it would stick on your teeth.
Stick on your teeth, yes.
So that was your experience, that the packages would come in the parcel post and among the
Yes.
postal orders.
And the postal orders. And I also remembered writing the letters that would be dictated to me. Because at 8, I had beautiful, as children of my age in Dominica did at the time, beautiful cursive handwriting. And I could spell. So my great aunt would dictate the letters to me to write to my
And you would
parents.
write.
And I would write whatever she said.
Amazing. How would you qualify your education in Dominica, short though it may have been, in preparing you for success in England?
You know, I think if I'd stayed in Dominica, I might have been more successful, I think. Because my start in Dominica, even with those, even with just 1 year of schooling at primary school, when I arrived in England, with all that strangeness, with all that being uprooted and arriving in a strange place with strange customs, strange habits, strange buildings, I still managed to come third at the end of the year, out of 3 classes. So yes, 90 children.
What school was that? What was the name of your school?
Downsell Primary School in Leighton.
Leighton. How do you spell Leighton?
Leyton in East London.
And how many children were in your class?
30 per class, and there were 3 classes per year.
And how many children were of West Indian origin?
Oh, there was, well, in my class, there were 2 or 3, which was unusually high, but then we were streamed. So being in the A stream, there were fewer Black children. And that's a whole story that I'd like to tell you about, about the education.
Well, I've read about the fact that Black children in England, unfortunately, were streamed in a way that seemed to have blunted their academic achievement, that they were not seen as particularly educationally proficient. But certainly you were A-streamed. A-streamed means what?
I was A-streamed, meaning the more able children were put in the A stream. So we were tested when we came in. They were written tests. They were standardized tests, I believe, thinking back, because they were printed tests. They were standardized. So if you got a certain score, you would end up in the A stream. By the time we got to the C stream, a lot of Black children were in the C stream. There were lots of reasons for that. A lot of these children were actually traumatized through being left, the separation from their parents who had left them with people, or sometimes they might have been left for 8, 9, 10 years before they came to England. They were properly traumatized, and they sometimes met families they didn't know, siblings they didn't know, step parents they didn't know. They spoke with a funny accent. People couldn't understand them. When I say funny, notice the air quotes. As for me as a Dominican, we stretch our short vowels are stretched to long and the long ones are shortened. So sit down on the sit would be sit down on the seat, So there was a lot of acclimatization, very quick. The thing about children, because I know this being as a teacher and hosting and having lots of children coming into the country from lots of different countries, it doesn't take a child long, to adjust. In fact, in a matter of 2, 3, 4 weeks, they'll be sounding just like the other children, because it's part of their survival. They move towards the local accent. Now, when you get home, when you step through the door, your Dominican accent has to be switched on. Otherwise, your siblings would ask you, you trying to sound Cockney. Why are you sounding like that? So
the accent you have is a Cockney accent.
My accent at the moment is it's a London, Caribbean London accent for somebody of my age.
Okay.
Yeah, who was actually born in the Caribbean, and who was educated at university. I would say we've more or less kept our Caribbean accent. You could tell we're from the Caribbean. We speak standardized English, but there is an accent, which will move along a continuum according to the audience.
Yeah.
So we've become, what can I say? Not bilingual or even trilingual, but we're very adaptable. We're very adaptable. You have different voices for different people. When I land in Dominica, I will sound more Dominican. If I'm speaking to somebody with a Dominican accent, I will be very Dominican. I'll even try some Creole, which I'm learning now. I'm trying to learn. Obviously, if I'm on the job at work, if I'm training teachers, no, my accent's very standard, very London, just like any of my colleagues.
Yes.
So in a way, it's not that we're schizophrenic, but who is the authentic person? I don't know. I don't know. Right. That's a big question.
Yes, indeed. But this is a fascinating interview. I want to get to the Ascansia. So tell us about the traveling day, or the day that you took that step off the pier into the bowels of that ship.
Before that, I remember being rowed. I'm sure we were in a rowing boat, because I remember being passed up a ladder. I remember.
Let me stop you there. I was wrong in saying
Uh-huh.
you were stepping off the pier into the bowels of that ship, because I remember that we did not have a deep water harbor. It only came in the mid-70s. So in the Roseau of my youth, there was a jetty, and the boats would anchor offshore, and there was something called a lighter, which was a boat that was rowed by lightermen. It was a huge rowing boat, and you'd sit on a bench, you know, and with your luggage, and it'd row you out. There were about 4 or 6 oarsmen, huge oars, and it would row you out, because it was a big boat. It wasn't a small canoe, it was a huge boat, huge rowing boat. And you'd go out, and then you'd have to go up a ladder. You're very correct. Your memory serves you right.
Yes, I remember being passed up that ladder. And we were assigned, me and my siblings, myself, Jerry, Brenda, Tony, and Philip. Philip was only 2 years old. We were assigned to the ship's nursery.
Because you were traveling without your parents.
That's right. That's right. We were unaccompanied minors in charge of the ship's nursery. So we had bunk beds. I remember the bunk beds. I remember our suitcase, our little grips. I remember the afternoon naps. I remember the Jamaican nurses.
So you had Jamaican nurses in the nursery taking care of you?
Yes.
How you know they were Jamaican? Their accent? Or they told you?
I didn't know a Jamaican accent then. I think they would have said they were from Jamaica, and they were talking about Jamaica. One of the things, it's not a nice memory, but one of the things I remember, during nap time, we had to have afternoon naps. And I remember feeling a great sense of responsibility, because I was the eldest child. So although the nurses were in charge of us, because I was the eldest, they made sure that I looked after my siblings. So I played a role, because I was a big girl at 8, you know, so I looked after them. So I remember nap time, we all had to go and take a nap. And I remember them going through all the children's suitcases and taking out whatever they wanted. I could, with one eye open, I could see them doing it.
Who are the people doing that?
The nurses.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So whatever our grandparents packed for us in our suitcases didn't necessarily reach when we reached. When we arrived, our parents would never know what was packed in the suitcases, because half of it probably just didn't arrive.
Yes, yes. What do you, well, that's very interesting. What do you remember about the food?
Oh, I have a funny memory about the food. The cornflakes. I'm sure somebody must have told you about cornflakes because we'd never seen cornflakes in our lives. So we were served cornflakes with milk, and we were all sitting there looking at this. And I said to my brother, "What is that? What's that?" And because he's a know-it-all, he said, "You don't even know that? You don't know that? That's fried lettuce, man. That's fried lettuce. How you don't know that?" So I thought, oh, well, it looks like fried
Fried
lettuce. I
lettuce.
believed him. I believed him. Yes, he had to know it.
Amazing.
It's fried.
Amazing.
So I remember the fried lettuce. I don't remember much about anything else about the food, but I was never a big eater, so I probably picked at this and picked at that. Um,
How
we
long were
were
you on the ship? Do you remember?
8. I just turned 8. Yeah.
Okay. That's how old you were, but how long did you stay on the ship? How the
I think it
journey?
was 2 weeks. It wasn't any longer than 3 weeks. Two to
Wow. So
three
you
weeks.
do you remember stopping at different ports or?
Yes, we weren't allowed off. People were I'm sure some people were talking about going off, but the children weren't allowed off. We were allowed up on deck. Um, I don't have a lot of memories about that because we weren't free to do. I remember running around on the deck and thinking back, I was wondering how comes nobody fell out? How comes they didn't lose any children? Because we did have some freedom to run around.
Yes, yes.
But no, I personally don't remember any of the ports they stopped at because I
Okay.
wasn't involved in that.
So you arrived at Southampton on November 11th, 1966. And are your parents
19
at the wharf waiting for you?
Well, we were told you were getting there. We felt the temperature getting cooler and we were told we would be there soon and get ready. The nurses said, pack, make sure you've got everything packed. Make sure you close your grip. And we had clothes for arrival. My mother had made 2 pink dresses for my sister and myself, and she had sent them down to Dominica in one of her boxes, one of the parcels. So we had instructions to dress in those clothes. We had arrival clothes. So we dressed in the clothes and we sat and we waited. We watched parents come, and the parents actually came on board the ship. So they were coming on board to the nursery, taking their children, and we sat waiting. And then I noticed a woman and a man standing together, and the woman was just looking at us. She had a bundle of black things in her hand, which were black duffel coats, as I found out later, a whole pile of black duffel coats.
Because it was
They
winter.
It was November, it was winter. So the pair of them were just watching us, and what I found out later, they were watching and waiting to see if we'd recognize them. And we didn't at first. We'd only been left for 1 year. Well, what I didn't know at the time was that I was short-sighted. So that probably contributed to why I didn't recognize them. But she looked familiar, so I kept looking. And then there was a spark of recognition. That must be my mama. So I rushed to her and she opened her arms, and then all my siblings followed me because they must have felt that must be our mother. But imagine that we had not been left. It was just a year, and
But
I
really,
didn't
it was
recognize it.
fading already. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing,
But mind you,
amazing.
I was short-sighted, so that probably
And so when
contributed.
you hugged her, did you cry or?
Yeah, yes. It was very emotional for her as well because she had missed her children so much. So that's why we all had to come together. There was no sending for one and then 10 years later sending for the other. And, you know, we all came together
And
because she
and
said things like she couldn't eat, she'd be eating nice things and she'd be thinking of her children. And yeah, it was because she'd left the baby, remember, he was just a year. He'd been weaned.
amazing.
He just
That
started to walk.
yeah, that's Philip.
Philip, yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. So now you boarded a bus to England, to London, I'm sorry?
We went on a train. We went on a train from Southampton to London. It was a long journey, but my little brother, he was 2. It was November, so he just turned 2 in August. But he could talk quite fluently. And he said, I don't like England. So my mom had him sitting on her lap. She says, why not? Why don't you like England? It's only bakery England, how I don't like England.
It's only bakeries.
Yes.
Why did you
Because we
say bake?
all the chimneys, because
Oh,
in those days, the fires, people kept their houses warm with coal fires. So every house had smoke coming out of it. And his only experience of smoke
was
was
it?
from a bakery.
Yes,
So
amazing.
his knowledge about the
Amazing.
world was quite wider too.
Yes, indeed. Only bakeries England have.
Only bakeries, I don't like England. And so we traveled to,
Was the sky as blue as in Dominica?
oh, everything was one color, November gray. And that smoke, you see, had a sort of smoke. It's a dirty fog that covered everything. Even the hedges, the leaves of the trees had a black soot on it. Everything was covered with a black soot. You would touch leaves and they would have a black sticky mess on them. And that came from the coal fires, because that's how
Nice.
people heated their houses in those days. So it was very strange, but arriving at the house in Leighton was even stranger, because all these houses were joined up. I had no concept of terraced houses in those days.
Because in Dominica, the houses are standalone, aren't they?
Yes, they're separate. You could run around your house in Dominica. You have a yard that you can run around, but terraced houses are all joined together. So we didn't know where one house started and one house stopped when we first saw the houses, but there were lots of front doors. So these houses were built in Victorian times for workers in London. They were built without indoor toilets.
You had no indoor toilets.
No indoor toilet, but I don't know if you remember, I'd said that we had built our house in 62, I think it was, in Goodwill. Goodwill was just
Goodwill, just for
developing.
those people who may be hearing this,
Yeah.
Goodwill was the first major exercise in Dominican history of urban planning and a suburban development. So in the Goodwill area, you had streets laid out with names,
Yeah.
and there were bungalows. There were concrete bungalows with electricity and indoor plumbing, indoor
Yes.
bathrooms, and indoor toilets. So it represented what passed in our day as Dominica's middle to upper class. That's where people lived, in Goodwill or higher up Santa Roma. So those, by any standard, even today's standards, were quite nice homes. A home like a Goodwill home here in Washington, D.C. area would maybe sell for $500,000.
Wow.
Yeah, because I mean, I grew up in that area later. Our home is still there, and I can tell you we had indoor plumbing, we had
Yes.
electricity, we had phones. So
Yeah.
coming from Goodwill, where you had indoor plumbing, to England, tell me about that. Because you're
Well,
supposedly going to a more advanced country.
we had left in a new house and my dad says his house was the first house in Dominica with glass louvers. So my dad says he got them from Trinidad. So he says. We left a 3-piece.
And just for those who again will be listening, Trinidad is a sister island to the south of us, British territory at the time, but was maybe the most advanced in many respects, other than Jamaica, of the English-speaking Caribbean islands, because it had a very old oil industry. So the standard of living in Trinidad was quite high compared to the other islands, and they had a lot of amenities. My father went to Trinidad in 62 as a firefighter trainee at Piaco Airport, and he said that Trinidad had a Mercedes-Benz dealership. He never forgot that.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
go ahead, please.
So my dad said,
just a little background on Trinidad.
yes. So we had the first glass louvers in Dominica, he said. We also had a 3-piece Caribbean blue bathroom set. So that we had a blue sink, a blue toilet with a blue cistern, and the shower was built from blocks. And was it tiled? The floor was tiled, but the walls were painted in a gloss paint, in a blue gloss paint to match. And we're still in this house now with this bathroom. So arriving in England.
So today, let's say the 29th of November, 2023, that house still presents as a modern house.
Yes, yes.
Almost 60 years later.
Yes, because it had flushing toilet. So arriving in England and wondering, well, where's the bathroom? There was no bathroom in this house. This house and all the other houses were built in Victorian times with no bathrooms. But there was a toilet built at the back of the house. So you actually had to go out of the back door to get to the toilet. It was more or less built in the garden. And remember what I said about the heating, there was no heating in that toilet. So in November, to go to the toilet, you would have to go out of the house and into the back garden to get into the toilet. It was attached to the house. You didn't have to go to the end of the garden. It was built onto the house, but it was a flushing toilet. It was one of those with the cistern at the top and a chain. So it was a Victorian toilet.
Yes.
So yes. What did we do for bathing? What did we do for bathing? Well, first let me tell you that we shared the house. The house was owned by a Dominican man, a Mr. Mello. Because in those days for Black people, it was easier to get a rental from another Black person. So my dad had been living with his uncle when he first came up. But when he said he wanted to send for his wife, his uncle said, you know, that's not what you came up for, and tried to dissuade him. But my mum was determined to come up and my dad was determined to have his wife. So he moved out and he found a rental by Mr. Mello. So we had the downstairs and Mr. Mello lived by himself upstairs. He hadn't sent for his family yet, but he bought a house. So we had the downstairs.
Was Mr. Mello from Grand Bay?
I'm not sure where he was from.
Because there's a Dominican nurse who was born in England. She would be in her early 60s now, called Shirley Mello from Grand Bay. And she's a nurse in England. I will provide you with her information so you can contact her when you go back up, because you guys may have some connection.
His family, when they came, they had red hair.
Yeah, Shirley is sort of like light complected. Yes. So it could be the same family.
He had a brother with ginger hair. I remember that. It eventually came. So we lived downstairs. We had 2 rooms and we shared the kitchen. So it was the front reception and what would have been the second reception of a Victorian house. The bedrooms would have been upstairs, but Mr. Mello kept the upstairs for himself and he rented us the downstairs. So it was 6 children and 2 adults in these 2 rooms. So my parents had the front bedroom, the front room. There was a bed settee in there. So it looked like a regular sitting room during the daytime until they transformed it into a bedroom at night. And the children had the second room. And in preparation for our arrival, my dad had built, or he'd put together 3 layers of bunks.
Amazing.
So bunks were sold in pairs, but I don't know how we persuaded them to sell him half a bunk, but we had 3. We had 3 and a double bed.
So you had to take a ladder to climb up to the top.
Oh yes, the bunks had yes. So my brother was at the top. Where was I? In the middle. And my younger Brenda and Tony were at the bottom.
So 2 to a bed?
Well, only the 2 smaller ones. were two to a bed. I had my own bed. Jerry, I've never shared a bed.
Okay.
Jerry had his own bed. Brenda had her own bed, and Philip and Tony, the two little boys. One was only 2. They was Philip with my big sister in the double bed. Yeah, I think Philip, the baby, slept with my big sister, with Janice.
Okay. So tell us about your first Christmas and then your first day at school.
Oh boy, that Christmas. It was really strange. I remember watching, we had a TV, and that was my first experience of television. It's a black and white, grainy TV. I think we rented it. Most people rented their TVs in those days. And my dad, color television.
Why was that? Because you're too expensive, or?
No, it was just a thing that you did. And as the technology improved, the rental company just gave you a new one.
Okay.
So most kids in my school rented a TV. It was just something that was done. TVs were being rented. Later on, people bought their TVs. But color television was just coming in. And my dad came home one day with a piece of acetate the size of the TV screen. The top was blue, the middle was pink, and the bottom was green. And he stuck it onto the TV screen. And we had color TV for that Christmas.
That's interesting.
But he'd actually bought this thing. It was designed to make you feel you had color TV, which was all very well if you had a scene, but if you were looking at somebody's face, it was a very odd color.
Yeah.
Thing about that, after a while, you stop seeing the color. You got accustomed to it, and you stop seeing the effect of the color TV. But my dad was known as a gadget man, so whatever tech was coming in new, we were pretty early in acquiring it, whether it was central heating or computers or whatever, he would be in it. He was in that. So that was our version of color TV.
But for Christmas, did you all make Dominican foods like black pudding and black cake?
Oh, well, my mom we always had Dominican food. We have Dominican food as often, things like red bean soup and with dombe. She cooked Dominican. So we were able to.
So for those who do not know, when you say dombe, you mean dumplings, flour dumplings.
Dumplings, yeah. We were able to buy Dominican food, Caribbean food, like red beans. The area we lived in, Leighton, and in East London, had quite a few Caribbean people. So there was a market called Ridley Road Market where Dominicans could go, Caribbean people could go and buy food that was being imported. So I don't think we missed out. We didn't grow up on English food. We didn't grow up on baked beans and fish fingers. We grew up on real food.
So what kind of meat would you have?
We would have, on a Saturday, we would have a soup. It was a stew it was what they would call a callaloo soup here. My mum bought the green. I'm not a fan of that soup. I was not a fan of that soup in England. Yeah, I didn't like it.
Green soup with vegetables.
And lamb. I did not like it. I hated Saturdays for that reason.
And what about Sunday, the Sunday meal?
Right, Sunday was always the same. It would be roasted chicken, macaroni cheese, red beans with dumplings in. We were allowed to make the dumplings. We were not allowed to do anything else. We didn't participate with.
Yeah, when you say macaroni, do you mean macaroni and cheese?
Macaroni cheese pie, roast chicken, red beans. My mum would wake up about 6 o'clock on a Sunday, and she would put on her music, her records.
What kind of records did she play?
Jim Reeves. She would play her country and western. She would play Jim Reeves.
And just so people understand, just so for the record, let people understand, in my childhood on Dominica, it was very popular to have Nat King Cole, Jim Reeves, Elvis Presley,
Yeah.
those kinds of, a lot of country and Western music.
Yes. Because a lot of I think a lot of those songs told stories. They were narratives. And a lot of them were narratives of love and loss and somebody done me wrong. And
yeah,
so they served as stories as well. So I think
nice.
they liked those kind of ballads. So there was John Holt, Thousand Volts of Holt, Thousand Volts of Holt records.
Yes.
As
Johnny
we grew up,
Johnny Cash, Bill Cosby.
yes, yes. So we grew up singing, you know, please, Mr. Postman, bring me a letter, and singing along. So she'd be playing her records on a Sunday and starting off.
There were very few calypso records, were there?
There was cadence. She had some cadence records.
But that's much later. That's much later.
Yes, that's much later. I don't remember any calypso records. I don't remember them. But later, when she was able to get Dominican records, she got the cadence.
Yeah. And for those who may not understand, cadence is a sort of local Dominican music with a heavy French influence, which is sung usually in French.
Yes, yes, yes. So while the music played, we were allowed into the front room, because by this time, I've skipped a bit actually. I've gone to when we bought our house, because we didn't stay in these two rooms for very long. By 67, my dad had bought his house. So we moved. We only spent that one Christmas there, and we moved to Leytonstone, which is the neighboring town.
And so how did that house compare? Yeah, was it like the house in Dominica?
No, it was another Victorian house, but we had the whole house. And sometime in the 60s, the previous owners had put a bathroom in upstairs. So we bought it with a bathroom.
Yeah. So the first house you went to, you didn't have a bathroom like a regular shower?
No, no bathroom, no shower. So I skipped a bit, really. So our parents used to bathe us in bath pans, like a plastic tub. So she'd boil kettles of water, and we would be bathed, sponged down in this bathtub during the week. And then on Saturdays, my dad would take us to the local bath.
There was a local bath, a communal bath.
It was a huge place. It was called Leighton Bath. And it was a huge building built in Victorian times, with cubicles with bathtubs. And the women who worked there would fill up the bathtubs. And we were only little, so we had each child had a bathtub for themselves. So we'd be swimming. It's a big bathtub. So
would you have to pay for that?
Yes, yes.
How much would you have to pay? Do you know?
I have no idea, but I don't think it would have been much. I don't think it would have been much. We each had a tubby.
So they would give you soap and bath towels, or you brought your own?
We took our own. My dad always took us, and I remember the ladies filling up the tub. We had a tub each, and we would be swimming away in the tubs. And I guess there was a time limit. When it was time up, we'd have to come out. But
what would they do? They would ring a bell, or they'd call you out?
They'd call us out. It was according to what time we went in. It was a lady's job to keep time. But adults went there, children went there. But
and were they all races of people?
Yes, yes.
There was no segregation by race?
No, not at all. Not at all. That was the public bath for the town, for Leighton. It was called Leighton Baths.
That's very interesting, because here in the United States in those days, especially in the South, well, certainly I don't think they had the concept of public baths, but public swimming pools were segregated by race. So white people were not allowed to swim with black people. Did you find when you went to England any sort of racial prejudice?
Yes, yes. When we went to school, although there were other black children, because we were new, there was a chance the white children, and it was never the girls, it was boys. It was always boys. They would refer to us as wogs. And, you know, after
Wog as
school,
in gollywog,
yes.
which
And
is a
after
British sort of doll with black face and white eyes, that type of thing. Red
yes,
lips.
yeah. And at the time there was a jam called Robinson's Jam that had a motto or motif of a gollywog. And when you bought the jam, you got a little badge. If you collected so many labels, I think you could get a little badge, which was a little gollywog that you could pin on your clothes. So a gollywog was a concept that was common at that time. So the children would, you know, say wogs, wogs, wogs go home. Well, not the children, it was the bad boys in the playground. Yeah, because there were lots of nice children as well. It wasn't everybody doing it.
And it wasn't like you know, you had to sit in a particular place because you're black. You had personal prejudice, but it was not like the law that said you had to go to a black school or anything like that.
No. As I said, you know, I was in the A stream because they tested me. I was in the A stream, but there were lots of children who were not even in the school. They were sent to a special school. And they were sent to what they called an ESN school, which is educationally subnormal. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
And
so you're saying a lot of West Indian children were sent to those schools?
Yes. Because for many reasons, a lot of them were traumatized through the separation from their parents, arriving in a strange country, meeting a mother that they'd not set eyes on since they were 1 year old, and they were now 9 or 10. Some of them met step parents that they didn't know and who didn't like them. They came with their accents from home, and they felt that somehow their parents preferred the English-born children. Because remember, they were older because they were born first. So they were a good help to those parents to help raise these younger children who were born in England. So quite a few of these children felt like they were the Cinderellas, and they actually felt that they'd been sent for at 13 really to help out with these younger children because their parents needed to go to work. And they were often teased by their younger children, their younger siblings who didn't want them there. I mean, that wasn't the case in my case, but lots of my friends have told me about their situations where their younger siblings did not like them, felt that they were coming to, you know, muscle in on what they were getting from their parents, whether it's their parents' loves or things that they could get from their parents. They had a different accent. They had different ways and expectations. They were older, so they were made to do a lot of the work and take care of these younger children. So trying to instill some discipline to the younger children made them unpopular with some of their siblings in some cases. There was one of my friends, she's not a Dominican, but she related a situation where her mother actually talked about her legal children, meaning she had been born out of wedlock. But since coming to England, the mother had married and made herself respectable, in quotation marks, and felt that children from her former life were not her real children.
Yeah. And just for those who are not familiar with British culture of that time, as a child, I remember my father saying to me in the army, one of the worst things, he said, a British sergeant kicked a Dominican soldier or Dominican-born soldier because the Dominican-born soldier called him, "You bloody blue-eyed bastard." And the British sergeant kicked him because my father says nothing is worse than to call someone a bastard, meaning someone born out of wedlock.
Yes.
So bastardy and the whole issue of being born out of wedlock in the British culture and the cultural mores of that time was, you were looked down upon, Of course, that has changed now, but in those days, I know, if you're an outside child, there's a certain taint that went with that. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, and that's what some of my friends experience from all islands, Jamaicans, Trinidadians from Barbados, they all experienced the same thing, where they were made to feel responsible for the little ones, and they were made to feel different. They felt their parents favored the younger English-born ones and the ones born within wedlock. So, I mean, that was the thing that affected someone I knew, even to the day her mother, when her mother was ill and dying, she cut her out of her will because she left her, she left her what she had to leave to her legal children.
Oh, that's sad.
How hurtful is that? There's all sorts of trauma associated with migration. And a friend of mine, Dr. Elaine Arnold, has documented that in her research, working with Caribbean families through migration. And it's the effects, she's looking at the effects of separation using John Bowlby's theories of attachment. Okay. So she's looking at that in reference to that whole migration of Caribbean families. And there is so much trauma. There was and still is so much generational trauma. So when Dominicans talk, they often talk about, oh, that person's from England or was from England, they're mad. That person's mad, they were in England. Or this one who's returned's mad, they were in England. I've seen the same in Trinidad. I've heard it in other...
So you're saying the trauma is not simply that those children were separated, those in Dominica from those in England, and then having to come to England and having to face that trauma of apartness and separation, but also when you returned, there was a sort of trauma, reverse trauma, that those coming back received somewhat, sometimes not a very welcoming reception because they're left. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying with often with people who've returned to the Caribbean, you find, maybe the word eccentric is a word that I might use, but you find that sometimes the behavior is not what locals expect. And the locals have observed some eccentric behavior and have referred to people as mad. Some of the returnees. That one was in England and they've come back, but they're mad. And I've seen and heard the same in Trinidad. I've seen and heard that said of people who've returned from England. Now, the context is not understood. The context is one of separation, one of trauma, one of being separated at a crucial age, which John Bowlby talks about, a crucial age. And
how do you spell Bowlby? How do you spell Bowlby?
B-O-W-L-B-Y.
B-O-W-L-E-Y.
B-Y. There might be an E between the B and the Y. I'll have to check.
It's B-O-W.
Yeah. L. Yeah. B-E-Y or B-Y. I'll have to check. We can check that. But okay. He had theories of attachment and separation. And there were key ages when you separate a child from its parents that will result in lifelong trauma.
Now, let me ask you, we're jumping around a little bit, but is a lot of that, and I want to say that you speak of this issue with a greater profundity than I've ever heard from anyone else. I've spoken, I know what you talk about because I know some of the returnees have actually left Dominica and gone back to England because they have not been received as warmly as they thought they ought to have been received. Because remember, like my uncle and the others, they were the ones who were sending the packages and the postal orders and sustaining Dominicans in way of, clothing, money and all that in difficult times, especially after disasters. And so I believe there was a sense that coming home would be coming home, but that they realized that home is not what they expected home to be, and they've had to return. So I want to credit you for that sort of openness and that sort of intelligent discussion of this issue, which has not really been addressed by our public policy planners in the school curriculum, at the state college, by our Ministry of Education, by our Department of Social Welfare. We have not created an enabling environment that respects the contributions, the humongous contributions of West Indians like those like yourself who left and have come back, but who really never, ever left. Why? Because the connective tissue in way of remittances, in way of support. My brother, as a Lawson Christian, went to school in Nottingham at Trent Polytechnic, and he paid for it. I mean, he took a loan, but it was nowhere sufficient enough to have supported his entire stay, because he paid for his lectures, but his boarding and his lodging was at family, right? And had that family enabling environment that existed, he would have had nowhere to stay and may have never gone in the first place. So the benefit to the Caribbean islands, those English islands from our Windrush generation, is enormous. And I think our Caribbean governments, frankly, have been incompetent, I must say, and have not been sensitive enough to do a better job in appreciating that historical fact of the support and finding ways that are more creative, more welcoming, kinder in receiving our people.
I need to add something here that has contributed to people's madness. And that is, and it's not just Dominica, it's not just Dominica. There are so many stories of people who've sent money to family, to relatives in their islands to help them build. And, you know, these people have actually sent photographs. I personally know people like this. People have sent photographs of the building going up, the building being constructed, progress, windows are going in, and only to find that they've been defrauded. Now, if that isn't enough to make you go mad, you know, it's happened
It happened to us. I will tell you right now, bluntly, it happened to us. We actually had to fire the builder because it was time of internet and so on, would send us photographs. Luckily, we had a friend who went and discovered the truth, and we had to fire him and give that friend authority to finish our home because we are returnees. We returned in 2003. Unfortunately, we've had to sell our home because the Dominica we knew is not the Dominica that exists. But I know that from personal experience, and that's quite sad because, again, it's an issue of honesty. Or dishonesty.
Yeah, I don't want to get political. I'm not, you know, party political at all. But any government, I think, should be assisting by putting structures in, like Ghana's doing now. Do you know, a lot of my friends are going to Ghana. I don't want to divert and go, you know, take you somewhere you didn't.
No. I mean, the fact is you have to speak the truth, and it has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with the truth. The fact is, so I tell people it's best and blessed to live your life with an attitude of gratitude. And there is an element of ingratitude when a family member depends on another family member, or a member of a community, a society, a nation, depends on his kith and kin to do right by him or her. And you're betrayed, your money is taken, you're cheated, you're seen as an outsider. It's a very deep hurt. And so many Dominicans have found the truism of the Bible, that prophets are never welcomed in your own country. And that's why people are going to Florida. I'll tell you right now, they're going to Africa, and they're not coming back to the Caribbean in the numbers that they would have liked to come back in, because it's not just Dominica. This is not just Dominica. This is Jamaica, it's Barbados. It's a huge loss for the Caribbean. And I frankly take this opportunity to condemn the Caribbean governments in the greater part, not all of them, but most of them have really done a very, very poor job of understanding, like the Jews do. The Jews understand the importance of their diaspora. The Caribbean governments pick a good game but in actuality, they do a piss poor job. And that's just the truth of it.
Yeah. I attended a diaspora forum not long ago, while I'm here in Dominica, probably a couple of weeks ago. I think there are plans afoot to address this, because there must be. So the diaspora was invited to attend the forum, and there were people there to, who could support and give links about what's available. Really, basically, the message was, we want your money. That was the message. That was the message. It was repeated. Yes, we would love to invest in our island. That's where we would love to invest our money. But, it's very risky. I am a risk taker. I'm a risk taker. It's very risky investing in Dominica, to be honest. And that needs to be softened a bit.
Sister Pam, people invest and people go where they are welcomed. And I'll leave it there for now, because there's so much more about England that I want to talk to you about, that I will maybe have to leave that for another time and another discussion. But it's just a truism that people, you see, we are all creatures of comfort. Nobody wants to be made to feel uncomfortable and a foreigner in your own land when others who are not Dominican have the rule of the roost. Okay? I know that I would not go to China and try to dispossess the Chinese. I would not go to Germany and try to dispossess the Germans. I came here to the United States and I respected the people who were US citizens. I worked with them, respected the culture, understood the heritage, educated myself, gave service, but never sought to dispossess, disrespect, denigrate, and degrade those persons who are Native American or people who are born here. I think then as Dominicans, we have the same expectation as born Dominicans, people who came from Dominica, to be respected in the island where we were born and to be given primacy in the island where we were born, just like Chinese have in China and Germans have in Germany. And when we lose that primacy and we are walked upon, then it will not work. And it's like you just said, it's also superficial. We are part of the diaspora movement. We created the Rosie Douglas Foundation, the Dominica Academy of Arts and Sciences. You've read Strangers in Soupissant. I mean, we are part of the Dominica Association. We raised our children. Our first child's middle name is Dominique.
Yeah.
We have pictures of her as a little baby in her madras in Creole.
Yeah.
We would go home every year for a month. They wrote a book on Dominica. And so we live and breathe Dominica. Dominica is in our hearts. It's never far from our minds. And to be treated the way we have been treated. I just have to be frank with you. And I'm not the only one who's saying this. And it happens in Jamaica as well. Maybe not in the same way. Trinidad. Our people need to do a better job. And it also means that as people who are overseas, you have to be engaged. We've been engaged. If it's Hurricane Maria or Erica, we put everything aside and we rush and rally to the aid of our motherland where our parents were born or where we were born.
As we are speaking, I've just got a text has just come up from Dona for a sponsored walk. Okay. They're continuously fundraising, these organizations, for Dominican causes.
So let's talk about your schooling. You bought your new house. You're coming through high school and university.
Right. High school. So by the time I got to the top of primary school, year 4, fourth year it was called then, my borough, which was the London Borough of Waltham Forest, had got rid of the 11 plus, so about 2 or 3 years before I got to that age. So there was no 11 plus for any of the children in my school by the time I got there. I think in many ways, we had a Labour government, and Labour governments were against the 11 plus. So borough by borough, local councils were getting rid of it.
So the 11 plus was equivalent to what, sixth form or what?
No, it was that exam, the common entrance. I think you called
yes,
it.
yes.
It was the equivalent of common entrance. So
yeah, you couldn't go to high school. You couldn't go to high school in Dominica without taking that entrance exam called a common entrance. And if you failed, then you would matriculate out of elementary school. You'd never go to high school. So you're saying that in England, that's where we got that from. There's something equivalent to the common entrance.
Yes, but by the time I got to 11, common entrance, or the 11 plus as it was called, had been abolished in my local authority.
So you moved to high school, it was automatic then?
Automatic. You just went to the nearest high school. Yeah. You just went to
in Dominica in my time, that was not the case. You had to pass the common entrance, and if you fail, you would never go to high school.
Right. We had a Labour government that believed in education for all, and they did not like the separation that the 11 plus caused, because it created 2 or 3 streams of schools: the grammar schools, secondary modern, and I think technical schools. And the Labour government was against that, so they got rid of it. Waltham Forest was a Labour government, and other Labour wards got rid of it. So I think it caused low expectations on the part of teachers, because there was nothing really to work towards. We never even got homework. I don't remember getting homework once at primary school. Not once.
So you're saying to me that the elimination of the 11 plus somewhat lowered standards?
It did, because it didn't just lower standards. There were new ideas coming into education, like discovery learning, learning by discovery, and they got rid of all the tables that were facing the front, and the school sports tables where the children sat in groups. So your back could easily be to the teacher, depending on your position around that table. We learned maths from cards. I'm really bad at maths up to this day. We taught ourselves maths. There was this SMA, Scottish SMP maths, Scottish Mathematics Project maths, which was a box of cards with different maths topics that individual children could be, out of the 30 children in the class, 30 children could be on 30 different topics. The teacher didn't actually directly teach the class. You went to the box and you took a card and you taught yourself what was ever on that card, and then you took the answer card and you marked it.
Wow, that was interesting. That's interesting. I just would like the record to reflect that I went to the Dominica Grammar School, but in preparation for the common entrance, we had to do general knowledge, some general science, and we had to do, of course, English and math. And you had to learn the times tables, and you would sing it out, you know?
Oh, yes. Oh, we did.
Twos are 4.
We did that.
Threes are 6. You know, I mean, there were 3 threes. Well, 3 and 3, or 3 threes are 9, 2 twos, that type of thing. And 5 fives, 25. So you have to sing it out.
Yeah. I benefited from that, but the years behind me didn't, because it was being phased out, So maths was particularly badly taught. It wasn't taught. I'll give you an example of a maths lesson aged 11, when I went to secondary school. Right, the lesson was, remember, it's discovery learning, yes? And the lesson was it was about hypotenuse, maths lesson. So the teacher decided he was going to play charades, or charades, you might call it in America, I'm not sure. Do you know the game of charades? Yeah. So he started off making actions like this. So everyone's saying tall, top. Eventually somebody said hi, and he said, yes, that's it, first syllable is hi. And then he did the same, and eventually somebody said pot after they'd said pan and box and different things. And eventually we got the words, all the syllables, hi, pot, in use. Lessons finished. Lessons done. There was no second lesson, next lesson.
Oh, wow.
That was it. That was it. So when people think that education's is better in the UK, it depends. It depended on the borough and the school your child went to. It depended on your parents' knowledge about the system. And many Caribbean children's parents just trusted the school system, whatever the school said. Because you did in Dominica, in your island, you trusted the teachers.
Yes. And the teachers taught. I mean, we had excellent teachers in the Caribbean. In fact, the people who came from the grammar school, I mean, one of the gentlemen I know became the director of General Motors Truck Division, Quality Management. The other one became the senior scientist at DuPont Labs. So our students coming from Dominica have done very well on the international scene. They've been very competitive.
Well taught.
And so, travel, I mean, migration is not always, the heaven on earth that it's portrayed to be, and I have a healthy respect for teachers of my time on Dominica. They're outstanding teachers.
Because my dad, as I said, he went to boys government Rosa Boys School. His maths was excellent. My dad's maths and physics was excellent. His English was not. I'll tell you one thing, I think, where we benefited was from the availability of books, reading. The libraries were full. We could take 8 books a week. We read a lot. All my brothers and sisters were readers. We'd go to the library and we were more or less self-taught, I would say. We had access to books.
I have a thing I say, read. Those who read lead, and it's so true. It's what I think accounts for any success I've had in education, and I always stress the importance of the library and reading widely, because by doing that, you exercise the mind, and you learn so much more than you could be taught in the classroom.
Oh yes.
So you decided then to get out, and you went. Are you there, Pam?
I'm going to plug. Yes, my battery. Let me just plug myself in.
Yeah.
1 second. It says low.
I hope I don't lose you, and we'll wrap up shortly.
I am just going to plug this in.
You're plugged in now, right?
Plugged in, yes.
This has been a fascinating interview. I've learned so much. I mean, you're a treasure trove. I mean, the Victorian houses, the public baths, your involvement. But now you're coming into high school. Tell us about high school and university.
High school was more of a social event. From the ages of 11 to 14, nothing much was happening. There's no exams at the end of 14. And we had lovely teachers. We did great crafts. And it was a case of low expectations. Nothing much was expected.
What high school did you attend?
I went to 2. It was broken into 2 schools. So they were very small schools. So one was Lake House Junior High, and the other one was Tom Hood Senior High, because they were very small schools. So they were broken into 2 stages. But I enjoyed school. I enjoyed school.
Did you say Tom Hood or
Tom
Thomas?
Hood. Tom Hood. Yeah, it was called Tom Hood.
Okay.
I enjoyed school, enjoyed the teach, but nothing much happened between 11 and 14.
Any special teachers you remember?
Yes, Miss Forster. She was the blackest teacher. When I say the blackest, there were no black teachers at my school, but she was brown. So that's why I say she was the blackest teacher. She was actually what you would call a South African colored.
Okay.
And she was my art teacher. I love that woman. She was my art teacher. And she was also my English teacher. Mr. Grierson, my English teacher. Because I love to write and read, I just took to these teachers, and I guess they took to me.
So Miss Foster, who was a South African colored, and Mr. Gray?
Mr. Grierson, who was an elderly white man, he, I think, really encouraged my love of stories and reading, because there was a certain day of the week he would actually tell us stories. instead of just
What did he
reading.
teach? Was he teaching English
English.
literature?
He was English, yes. English teacher. Lovely man. You know, you asked me about racism at one point, and some of the most helpful people in my life have been white people, white English people. Some key people in my life. I can't deny that. Teachers, college lecturers, in employment. I'm not saying that's the case. Whoops. Are you still there? I just dropped the phone.
Sure, sure.
I'm not saying that's the case for everyone. I'm not saying that's the case for anyone. I'm just talking about my experience.
Of course.
Apart from children at school, you know, chasing. That didn't last for long, by the way, because my mum put an end to that. She put an end to that because, as she would say, she didn't make her children for people to chase home. So she gave us instructions of what to do. She told my brother what to do.
Which was?
And you know what? This is just so not PC, but this is what she said. Grab hold of the smallest one. Grab hold of the smallest one when they come for you and get a good grip. Wind your hand around the hair, get a good grip and let them have it with your satchel.
Okay. So she taught self-defense, really?
Self-defense. And they backed off. And because...
And you carried leather satchels. You carried leather satchels.
Well, there was something in it that was a bit weighty, but I'm not going to go into that. I'm not going to go into that. But they only did it once. They only had to have a cool satchel once, and that was it. They stopped that.
Yes.
And they didn't come for me or my sister or the younger brothers and sisters.
So there's something in the satchel, maybe like a brick or something.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And that,
well,
look, it's a shame that mothers would have to give their children that kind of self-defense advice, but it was necessary, and it stopped very quickly. That stopped very quickly.
Yeah, but by and large, in your neighborhood, the people who are West Indians and the white people got along generally.
They got along well because we went to school with, we got along with the children, because we went to school. They were our schoolmates, our classmates, they were our friends.
Yeah.
But I remember on the street that we lived, when we bought the house in 1967, there was an old lady living at the top of the road. And we would, on our scooters, we lived on a very short road. So we would ride our bikes or, use our scooters to go up to the end of the road, turn and come back down to our house. And she'd always come out and say, "Get down your own end, go on, get down your own end." So she didn't like us. Maybe she was just an irritable, old lady, but she didn't like us. But my mum, you don't mess with my mum. You don't mess with my mum. Trust me.
Is your mom still alive?
Yes. She's 89 now. He's 89. My dad passed in 2014.
Okay, how old was he?
78. Yeah.
Is your mom still lucid? Is she able to do an interview?
Oh, yeah. Yes. You don't mess with my mom, though. You don't.
Well, maybe when you get back to England, we'll arrange for us to do an interview with your mom so she can give us her perspective,
Oh boy, I don't know if we can. I'll talk to her.
Just hold your laptop. Just hold your laptop with you.
Yes. You did not mess with her. You did not come in front of our door to complain about her children. You just didn't.
Well, let me just go ahead. Well, that's wonderful to know. So let me just, get into university. What did you decide to study?
Well, from the time I was 12, I think it's because of Miss Forster, because I love this woman so much. She's such a lovely teacher, the South African one. I decided that I wanted to be a teacher. So when we got to secondary school, though, the careers teacher asked us to think about what we wanted to do. So I said, I already know what I want to do. I want to be a teacher. He said, well, the Army and the Navy and the Royal Air Force and they're coming to talk to the children. And also there was a furniture maker and some secretarial schools. It seems as if we weren't aware at the time, but it seems as if certain schools only had access to certain careers. We didn't know at the time because, you know, we just went to our local school. But at our school, only certain subjects were even available in GCSE. So, yes, maths, English, French, but there are other subjects that were not available as GCSE subjects. There was a new experiment. They've been experimenting with people all the way through my school. There was a new experimental examination called, I think it was CXC or CSC, it was called, Certificate of Secondary Education. But you had to get a grade 1 in that for it to be the equivalent of an O-level, of an O-level. So you had to even work even harder, you know, to get the equivalent. So
we did O-levels and A-levels in my time.
Yes, our school had A-levels, but you had to jump from a CSC 1 to A-levels, which was a harder route, really. But because parents just accepted what the school did, you know, we didn't have the parents to come up and complain and make a fuss about it. So I went to, when it was career time, the careers teacher was actually suggesting that, oh, you went in the Navy, or, you know, you could be a nurse in the Navy, or the Army's coming to recruit, or maybe
Did many West Indians go into the services?
Some went in as nurses. I don't think the boys were too keen on wearing uniforms of any kind, because by then it was the 70s. There was a lot of overt racism, especially since that program Roots. Do you remember when?
Well, there are two things. There are two things that I think were happening. I mean, it happened in Dominique as well. There's a rise in Pan-African consciousness and Black power, Black pride. And there was also the rise in England of the National Front. You know, I remember because we had family in England, so we were very close to what was happening. And I remember the National Front would try to march through Black areas, or areas where there's a high Black population. And there was a response by socialists, white socialists, and Black people against those marches. And in England, what has always impressed me favorably was that there's always been, like Mr. Forster and others, a strong white progressive element made up of socialists and other progressives who've always taken an anti-racist stance.
You have to give them their due. You do.
Of course, you must certainly do. I think they have enhanced the quality of civilization, not only in England, but across the world, by their high-mindedness, you know, because it's easy to fall into racial gulags, or, you know, your camps, own race and your own community, and just be unkind to others who do not look like you. And so when you are a person of the dominant race, which is what is in England, the white people, yet be able to maintain a transcendental humanitarian impulse, to me, you know, you've really arrived at the level of human being. You've evolved. Because it's easy to be prejudiced, you know? It's hard work to not be prejudiced, you know what I mean? Because it's instinctive, you know? People generally, you know, tend to associate with people who look like them.
Like themselves.
You know what I mean? And so when you have the ability, the strength, the intelligence to be able to see the humanity of someone who does not look like you, be they Black, Chinese, Jewish, that's a mark of distinction in my view. And I honor persons like that, because they are the future of mankind or humanity. Because absent people like that, I mean, we're just all barbarians. We're all just savages, you know, always at war with each other because of our ethnicity or racial hierarchies and all that. So I remember those days through reading and talking to family of the alliance between Black West Indians primarily and progressive white people in England, you know, standing up together against the National Front. I remember there was one march where they tried to march through Lewisham, and they had to run away.
And were met with resistance, yes. Even there was a teacher called Blair Peach that was killed in one of these marches, a socialist. So the NUT, National Union of Teachers, remembered him, and for many years
How do you
afterwards.
spell his last name? Is that like in peach the fruit?
Yes, Peach. There might be an E on the end, I'm not sure. But it's like the fruit, yes. But, you would need to speak to boys who went to school the same time with me to get the real full blast of their struggle at this time with the National Front. Because male friends I've got.
And just for those who will not know, the National Front has its roots in that conservative politician, Enoch Powell, who really raised the banner of fascism in England. His predecessor was Oswald Mosley, who was the black shirt leader. They were Nazis, really, and they followed a Nazi path of racial antagonism towards black people. And I'm happy to know that the National Front is not as prominent today as it was then. Is it still, or am I wrong?
Well, it's under different disguises, but they exist, but not as the National Front. They have different names.
Yeah.
But back to the boys, their struggle was a lot greater than girls, because I think they were out there on the streets more. So they encountered these people. They were chased. If they were in the wrong area, they would be chased by skinheads. The National Front shaved their heads. They had a particular look, shaved heads, jeans with braces, and big bother, what they call bother, Bovver, as in bother, but they pronounced it bother boots, because it was to give people some bother or botherations by kicking them in. They had steel toe caps. So if a black boy found himself in the wrong area, he could be chased by these guys and beaten up.
These are like the Teddy Boys.
They were, Teddy Boys were similar, but I'm not sure if they were more into the style of the Teddy Boys, but the National Front skinheads were definitely into violence. Definitely into the violence. The ironic thing is, though, they love reggae. They loved reggae. They would be dancing to reggae. I don't get it, but they love reggae.
Yeah, well, I know that reggae is very big among both white people in the UK and black people. I see the videos on YouTube of Sound System or Channel One Sound System in Norton Hill Carnival, and they're all having a good time.
But in those days, for people who declared to hate black people so much, to be into reggae was a bit strange to me. But not only were the skinheads after black boys, the police were as well, because they drove around in what the boys called Black Mariahs. Black Mariahs were black vans, police vans, and they would pick up the boys on the streets, because there was a law called the Sus Law that Margaret Thatcher introduced, and Sus is short for suspicion. So just on suspicion, they could arrest you. They could arrest someone and take them in for questioning and give them a good beating in the back of the vans. I mean, some boys from that area have actually been, brain damaged with the beatings they got. Some were killed with the beatings they got. There were lots of deaths in custody, mysterious deaths in custody. There were lots of lies and trumped up charges against these boys. And it's only now, really, that the Met Police are being revealed, for the people they were in those days, for the lies they told, the cover-ups. That's all out in the open now. But in those days, they were believed, of course, because they were the police. And unfortunately, a lot of black parents couldn't. They believe, well, if the police said that, you must have been up to no good if the police said that you did that. So a lot of the boys didn't get the support that they needed. So some ended up in jail, some committed suicide, some were killed by the police. And often, because of these encounters that they were having on the streets with the police, they were getting into trouble at school because they became rebellious, so they were being expelled from school. So you got whole droves of, men my age who were expelled from school, didn't finish their schooling, so did not get the jobs that they should have got. And it maybe took them into their 30s until they found their feet again, because they went back to college, to adult college, and found their feet again and qualified themselves for something. So, yeah, Black people haven't had, especially the males, have not had it easy in England at all, because of systematic racism.
Yeah.
In the workplace, discrimination in the workplace. It's still going on. It's going on, especially if your name isn't English. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to get accommodation, and you've got an African name, for example, a landlord might just scroll past that, dismiss you just on your name. So
I know that we've been at this for a bit, and I know we have to continue maybe at another time. There are 2 things or 3 things I'd like to cover. Of course, I would like to know the university you attended and what you studied. Briefly about your own family, where you have one, and then the Diaspora Museum. So let's start with the university you attended.
Okay, well, it was the University of London and Shoreditch College, which was in Egham, Surrey. So I got to go out of London into a village. It was a nice little village, this particular college, because London had colleges all over. So it was a college of education, but it was also of design technology. That was their main specialism, design technology. There were only a few it was a teacher training college, but there were only a few humanities students there. So there was mostly males doing design tech.
And were you design tech or were you humanities?
Humanities, because I did English. I did English. Yeah.
So you're an English teacher?
Yes.
So when did you graduate?
1980. I graduated in 1980 with a Cert Ed. I got a distinction in as a Cert Ed, and then I did another 2 years and graduated again in 82 with a B.Ed honours. In the teaching.
That's a Bachelor of Education.
Yes. So I specialized in the psychology and teaching of reading the second time. The first time it was English and arts and crafts. So I only taught for 1 year in England. I did my probationary year because I'd met my husband at the college, the first one, the London.
Where was he from? Was he born in England?
No, he's a Trinidadian.
Okay, so is he a teacher as well?
Yes, he was he started off as a teacher, design tech. So I went to Trinidad. He returned to Trinidad. We got married after, and I actually lived in Trinidad for 7 years.
How many years?
7. So both my daughters were born in Trinidad.
Okay, and what are their names?
Nyasha and Nikisha.
And what did they study?
Nyasha did psychology. She's a counselor. She's a counselor. And Nikisha teaches beauty therapy.
And they're in England?
Yes. Yeah.
And, when I grew up, we just said England, meaning the United Kingdom. We kind of use the two interchangeably. Of course, now we know better. We know better. Yeah. We know there's England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and so on. But we just used to say, England.
Yeah.
All right. And so your husband, what's his name?
Joseph.
Yes. Yeah. Is he still teaching, or is he retired?
We're both retired now from teaching, but he was a principal. He went into technical vocational education. So yes. He managed the exams, chief examination officer in Trinidad for TechVoc. He's retired from that. We're both looking forward to we're both looking forward to growing food in Dominica.
I'm hoping that both of you can become part of Rebuild Dominica, which is our nonprofit that does development work, relief and development work. And we really believe in fact, I did an article on vocational education, which I'll send you, because the Dominica Grammar School had a technical wing, so I even did technical drawing in third form I did woodwork also.
Right.
But then I
Right.
went back into the academic, so there was a stream, but I went back into the academic. So I only did VOTEC for
Yeah.
1 year. So,
Well, he sees technical education as crucial, really. It's vital.
I
And for
agree.
Dominica, it's vital for England.
Oh, yes.
I think over the years, a lot of students have gone to university. They've come out with degrees that are absolutely useless
I
to
agree.
them.
I am a big believer in vocational education. So we'll have a discussion offline about this because, we are well met in that regard. I do believe that it's crucial to our future.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, as we conclude, what caused you to think of or to come up with the idea of the Dominica Diaspora Museum?
Right. Well, as I've said, Dominica's always been here. I've never been detached from Dominica. Because I guess we had a house here and we've kept our house here. So that connection was always there, yes. So I've never been disconnected from Dominica. But what really led to crystallizing this idea in my head was COVID, was the pandemic. During the pandemic, there were so many deaths. Friends' parents were dying. Family members were dying, and I just thought, oh my, I would have really loved to have got these stories from these people who are no longer here. I've lost the opportunity because I was already into genealogy, I've done the DNA family, my heritage.com, I've done the DNA analysis. I've been building my family tree, tracing my Wesley roots, and gradually doing my Portsmouth roots. And one by one, people that I had intended to speak to were passing on. And it's becoming, really imperative that we need to harness these stories. We need to save these stories, because my dad told me so many stories, but there's no way that I can retell them in his voice. I can't. I haven't got his turns of phrases. I haven't got his experience. I remember my dad, one of his phrases was, now, unbeknownst to me, there's always some little hidden fact from the listener. He was just a storyteller, and I'm thinking, I haven't got my dad's voice. I need to capture these stories. And also,
did you have a chance to do any tape recording of your father before he passed?
No, but there are some there should be some videos somewhere on old beta tapes or something that I could probably.
You can get those digitized, huh?
Yes, I need to ask my mother where they are and see.
Yeah.
We've probably got something, but I don't have stories. I don't have his stories. I managed to recall some just shortly after he died. They're all funny. I mean, he grew up on John Wayne and Tarzan, and so there's usually a fight in every story.
Yes,
it's usually a gas. But I just love the way he told them.
Those people who might be listening to this, and she just said something that is redolent about childhood. Higas was the term used in the cinema when a fight broke out in a movie, or in the street. If a fight broke out in the street, people watching would say Higas, almost to egg them on. It was the fighting chord, the fighting chant. Higas.
Yes.
Yes. So that's an interesting thing because I don't think they say that anymore in Dominica.
I haven't heard it since I'm here. Do just a quick aside. Dominicans, from what I've heard and seen, they're not really into fighting. I haven't seen, they're more into their bite. Their bark is worse than the bite, from what I've seen. There's a lot of cussing out there, but not very much fighting, which I'm glad for. That's okay.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. I mean, sadly, the cursing part is bad enough, because I remember as a child, you could be arrested for cursing in the street. My father was a policeman after the war, and his first arrest was for cursing a woman who used a choice Creole curse about that part of female anatomy. And he arrested her, and she was charged one shilling. So cursing is something that
Well,
was not as common when we grew up on Dominica, in the street at least.
your father would have been very busy in Dominica right now, because I hear it in the neighborhood all the time.
Yes,
It's
yes,
mother
yes.
this and mother that. Yeah, I hear it all
Yes,
the time.
yes, yes. And they
But
don't
I'm
talk about
glad I
mother
didn't
hen.
fight him.
Oh, Mother
Yeah,
Hubbard.
I don't see the fighting. I don't see the fighting, which is good. Which is good.
So the idea of the museum would be to collect the historical record of Dominicans who went overseas to England, to Canada, the United
Right.
States, and to preserve that for posterity. Is that right?
It is. It's the Dominica diaspora. I had lots of thoughts about the name and the word diaspora, and decided not to use it for reasons we could talk about later or another time. But we do have the concept of a migration museum in London. So I decided migration was safe to use, because it would cover not only people who had left Dominica, but people who had come into Dominica or returned to Dominica, and would also include people who had not been sent for. Those children that in England we call them barrel children now, who'd been left behind. I want their stories as well, because their stories have not really been told.
I agree. I agree.
Widely enough. So I want their stories too. So the museum is to harness those voices and those stories.
So it will be DMM,
so
Dominica Migration Museum, or Dominica Museum of Migration.
Actually, I thought about it, and I have got a name for the museum, which is Voyage. So the name is Voyage, but the explanation is, yes, Migration Museum of Dominica.
Okay. I like it. It's very good. And I understand why diaspora may not be politically correct anymore, because frankly, recent actions.
I'll be allowed to use the word.
You broke up. You broke up, so I didn't hear.
Okay, I'm here. Let me just reach for something.
Okay.
Yeah, let me just reach for something. Yes. Okay. So you understand about the diaspora. A lot of Dominicans do not want to be called diaspora.
Well, we popularized the term in the early 2000s. But after Rosie Douglas died and people started being paid to return home to vote, that poisoned the well, because people in Dominica began to feel that those overseas were coming in to vote against their interest. And so I understand and I respect that. So we just use that which is less, let's say, conflict-driven. I think that idea of yours is a fine idea.
We're all Dominicans, right? And one of the things that I really want to make understood is that we're all Dominicans. It's diaspora. People abroad are not a different caliber of Dominicans. We're all Dominicans, whether we live here or we live there.
Indeed.
We're Dominicans. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
So that the aims of the museum was to capture those stories, but also to see how Dominicans have fared in the countries where they moved to, how their lives, the questions you've been asking me. Well, what were your experiences of school, of racism, of employment? What were the challenges and the triumphs? But it's not just about the great and the good and the people who've achieved lots. It's just ordinary people's voices. I want ordinary people's voices as well.
Yes.
I want to see how political changes have affected Dominicans, how the themes of the decades, how the 60s, how the 70s, the 80s affected them in the countries where they were. And I envisage a timeline. And I envisage different countries, like Dominica's in Antigua during the 60s. What was happening there, what was happening in London, what was happening in the United States, in Guadeloupe, and so on. So if we ever get a physical space, I see a timeline in that space.
Yes. Well, I tell you something. I mean, the fact of the matter is the Dominica Academy started online and is still online. And I'll offer, of course, of her space to rebuild Dominica as an address, a fixed address. But I like the idea of an online museum because, better small things done than great things planned. And the thing about the online academy, it would be readily accessible to a global audience, and with the ubiquity of the cell phone or the smartphone,
Yeah.
people can send you interviews, photographs, all
Yeah.
kinds of things. So let's put it this way. If I have this piece of memorabilia, this glass, right, in a museum, I'm not allowed to touch it anyway. I can't take it home with me. It's behind a glass case and it has
That's
a label. All I can do is look at it, right? So when you have some memorabilia, for instance, of a grip, let's take a grip, for instance,
right.
or portrait or something, it's the same thing. It's just that it's online, it's not in your space, but the
Yeah.
same effect is obtained and at a much reduced cost in
Yes. Yes.
maintenance, in
Yeah.
expenditure. So it's just a brilliant idea. And I would like you to know that we offer our support for this.
Oh,
And I
lovely.
wanted to, I thank you for this because it's well thought out from what I've heard from you, and it's needed because it would add to the
Timely.
education. It's very timely and would add to the
It's time.
education material that is going to be needed to change the minds of public policy makers and the
Uh-huh.
ordinary citizens, the students at the infant school, elementary school, high schools. We need to educate our people about our people. So we are not seeing in our curriculum that sort of introspection that allows Dominicans to understand the Dominica story. So we
Mm.
need to write more. We need to have more symposia, and the museum, for instance, provides that platform. And now with Zoom and WebEx and so on, we can have
It's
a
possible.
conference
It's
of
possible.
Dominicans all over in the French islands, in Antigua, in
Mm.
Canada,
That
United
would be
Kingdom,
wonderful.
United States.
It would be
Let's
wonderful.
pull it together and launch the museum.
Think of what we could achieve. Think of what we could achieve. You
Oh,
know, when we harness,
greatness.
it's got to go online first because the technology that exists, we're going to reach more people. Sorry, there's a frog in my throat.
That's okay.
Um, one of the things I don't know if I highlighted about the family trees. Um, these fractured families that we have through migration. One of my dreams is that people will actually start to build their family trees together, put them
So
back
that can be
together.
one element of the museum. So one
It
element of
is,
the museum
it
would be
is
the family
absolutely.
tree section where people can build their family trees and reconnect.
Yeah.
So that would
And
be called a family reconnection.
that absolutely, because one of the things one of the current problems we have in England right now, and it might be the same in other countries as well, it's with the young people, the youth. There's a lot of knife crime. Yes, young people are killing young people. It's quite prevalent in the big cities. And I know for a fact that there's a lot of research to show that knowledge of family history and knowledge of your roots and having a strong identity has a really positive impact on identity and on success in life. And in fact, there was a researcher that said it's the best single predictor of children's emotional health and happiness is to have those roots. So it's not just about children in the diaspora, it's about children here as well. Because this museum is to benefit those abroad and those here as well. So I think the whole story of how we were separated since slavery, and then we were separated through migration, all for the benefit of England and France and European countries. Yes, all of this is for the benefit. I mean, even for myself, my youth, my strength, the best of my intellect has gone to another country, not to Dominica. So if we can, look at this again and reconnect, build back our youth, let people know where their roots are, where their family trees are, and that you have that sense of, yes, I might be living in another country, but I know who I am. I feel strong. I know somebody in my family tree who overcame this or overcame that. He had this problem, but I know this uncle who was able to do this, and he set up his own business. You know, all these stories, all these family stories help to strengthen children. They're not blowing in the wind. They're not you know, tumbleweed blowing in the wind.
That's
they have
right.
roots.
That's a
and
very good
they can...
sort of metaphor that you've used here. Tumbleweed, rootless, aimless, misguided, or not guided at all. And so your engagement with the museum of the Voyage, if you can call it that for short, is not some idle stroll down the lanes of nostalgia. It's really a more profound effort to craft a noble narrative of our people's march through time, our ability to overcome the vicissitudes of chattel slavery and colonialism and racial hierarchy, and to place ourselves in a position of strength and pride in our antecedents. And that pride and strength in our antecedents and knowing our story gives a guide post, a map, sort of direction that will allow for young people to move away from the misogyny and the self-destructive behavior, gangsterism, drug use, and become nation builders.
Absolutely. It's got to be for the future. It's got to be for our descendants.
That's right.
It's got to be for our descendants. It's got
to
be
for
the...
So it's not simply backward looking, but it's backward looking so we can be more powerful moving forward.
Exactly.
I want to say, Dr. Pamela Clark, I know you don't have a PhD, but Pam, I just want, well, soon. Pam, I just want to say this. I know I'm not the best interviewer. My wife sometimes says I try to say more than the person I'm asking questions of. However,
no,
I apologize for my enthusiasm sometimes overcomes good sense. But I must say that this has been the most insightful and delightful interview I've done in a very long time. And I look forward to more. You've whetted my appetite for the project of Voyage, because I believe it's something that can be replicated by every island. And I believe it will help our policy planners to have a better sense of our people who have left and those who return, not simply to look at us as a way to get money, quick money. It's almost like this whole analogy I make to prostitution, because that's not what we should be thinking about. But we should be thinking about productive things, meaningful things, really building up the kinship and the family sort of fabric, because we're small islands and we are all really family. And so we can get away from the divisiveness and really rebuild the fabric of nationhood and amity and community and Kudme, which was cooperative effort, which was what the emancipated Africans who had been freed really had to rely upon to build up after the end of slavery in 1834. So I want to thank you, and I would like you to say a few words for those Dominicans at home and abroad, a few words of hope and a few words of promise as you work with others like me and work with others and like myself to build an online museum called Voyage.
Okay, well, thank you for this opportunity. To all Dominicans everywhere, whether you're in the UK, Canada, Guadeloupe, Martinique, China, Japan, wherever you are, I'm inviting you to join the museum that's coming soon. It's for you. It's called Voyage, and it's a migration museum. And it will tell your stories. It will tell our stories. It's going to tell the stories of Dominicans who left Dominica to seek their fortunes abroad. It will be about their times, their journeys, their experiences abroad. It will harness those stories and the experiences for the benefit of Dominicans of all generations and future generations. It will be about people who've come to make Dominica their homes. They might have come from Syria, Lebanon, the UK, Germany. If you've made Dominica your home, you're a Dominican now. And this is about your story too, and about your contribution to Dominica. So it's also about those who didn't leave, but their families left. And they have fractured families because of that. And we are spread all over the world, all over the Caribbean. So Dominicans are in St. Lucia, Guadeloupe. They're still Dominicans, and they still have a love for Dominica. I know, because I know so many Dominicans, and I'm an admin on lots of Dominican groups that I've put together myself since COVID. I know Dominicans they're the most patriotic of people. Dominicans abroad are the most patriotic of people. We love our country, we want to build our country, we want to support our country. And what we're asking is for you to join us to do that. We would like the government to assist us in doing that. And I do thank them for the Diaspora Forum, but we would like more. We would like structures put in place, like countries like the Gambia and Ghana has done, to encourage people to come back home, invest in their country. So we shouldn't have to be struggling with the planning authorities, struggling with buying land, being ripped off left, right, and centre. All of these obstacles and barriers are really preventing our people, from putting our youth, our strength, our knowledge, experience back into Dominica, where it belongs. We love Dominica. We do. And the museum will be launched in the spring, by February, probably for Black History Month, US Black History Month. We'll get it going. I'm working with some guys on marketing and to get this together as a not-for-profit organization where we can pool together to achieve things for young people here in Dominica and to impact on young people in the diaspora. Because, together we can achieve great things for the good. What I would really love this not to be spoiled by is what I've seen as mépris. And for those Dominicans who don't know what mépris is just idle throwing words. Let's be constructive. Let's be positive. Let's think critically, but in the criticism, let's be constructive and positive. Indeed. So it's easy to criticize, but we want ideas. We want positive, constructive ideas. So if you're joining us, you better be positive, because we are looking to rebuild. We're looking to build, okay? And we're looking to do something good for Dominica. So you hear more. There'll be more about Voyage, which is the name of the museum, Migration Museum of Dominica. You'll be hearing more about it. So thank you so much, Gabe. Thank you so much. I should say,
Pam,
Dr. Christine.
you are a great Dominican. I'm so very proud of you and your husband and your family, Natasha and Nakisha, and your mom and dad. Your dad, of course, left us. And yes. Yesterday you sent me a book by the Right Honorable Judge Irvin Andre called Strangers in Supisan, because he is actually he was not born in Dominica. He was actually born in Curacao and grew up in Dominica, in Goodwill. Yeah, like so many famous Dominicans like Ophelia Olivache. Do you have the book close at hand so you can show it up on the screen? Is it close at hand?
Yes, 1 minute. Let me just get it. Just wait for 1 second. I'll grab it. Okay, let me.
I just want to comment on your background. It's like some grass, like you in the nature island. So you're showing a book. Let me see you now. Let me see.
Yes.
It's not sure. Okay, Nat, you're coming and going. But if you can sit still, maybe it may work. Because I can't see you yet. I'm seeing the grass.
I think the way this goes, maybe if I put it
I can see you now. Oh, you disappeared. Okay, here is the book. Strangers in Supisat by Dr. Irvin Andre. If you pull it back a little bit closer to you, pull it back closer to you. That is better. Yeah. Lean back a little bit, and then you will see it. Well, I can see your hands, but somehow I'm missing the book.
I don't know. But take the background off, and then it's
yes. This is much better. Strangers in Supisat, Dominicans in British West Indies in Curacao, 1943, 1963. Wonderful book by Dr. Andre about Dominicans who went there during the war to work in the oil industry. And you have another one by Miss Sorrento.
I've got this. I've got the life and legacy of Dr. Reginald F. Moore.
Yes, he was
Also by
Trinidadian. Yes, also by
Trinidadian.
Andre. Yes, indeed.
Um, and Edward, I think he did well by me this week. This one
Edward
is
Oliver de
the
Blanc. Yes, indeed.
yes,
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So,
and I've got the Home Again by the Surrenders.
yes,
I've got
very
that
good
one
book.
in English.
Very good book by Miss Sorrento, Celia Sorrento. Very good book.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Well, I'm happy to see you've got some products of Poncase Press. Again, Celia Sorrento and Irvin Andre are members of our diaspora, or people who have Dominican roots who migrated or their parents
Yeah.
migrated, so on. So thank you so much again. And I will make this available to you. And I look forward to us working together on Voyage.
Thank you so much. We've been talking about this since COVID. Well, thanks. We're getting there. Thank you very much.
We did. Today was a great delight. Thank you.
Thanks.
God bless you. And I look forward to talking to you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.